Please help me give a warm Georgia Tech welcome to Moira Vetter.
Hello, hello. All right, yes, let's do the old laptop number. All right, and I can wander. Oh, okay. Well, I'll fill the space. First of all, I'm not supposed to be your speaker today. Carol Godfrey is supposed to be your speaker, and so I'll tell you a little bit about who she is and why I'm here and who I am. And then I'm going to give her presentation, and then you can ask me anything you want. As has been mentioned, I am in the marketing and advertising space. I started out client side in the technology business, and for 25 years I've been in the Atlanta marketplace, and after 5 years on the client side in technology, I moved over into the agency space, only doing technology and complex industry marketing. So I've worked very closely over the years with technologists, engineers, people of that mindset. And so Carol, who's supposed to be here giving her speech today, is a mechanical engineer. And she actually works in, she elevated through various positions through sales, in businesses that are engineering focused, but then went on to become a marketing person. And so one of the things when she did the Hail Mary to me on today's presentation, I'm going to give her talk, but she and I have known each other for a long time. I've worked with Southwire Company, where she works, for about 21 years. And I've worked with Carol for 8 years. And we often face common challenges, and that is taking a technical product set to market. And doing so where sometimes your buyers are technical buyers and sometimes your buyers are business buyers. And so the dynamic that happens in the workplace when your work product is technical or your skill set is technical can be challenging, because you have to learn to speak another language. You need to, speak tech when you're with tech people, and you have to learn to speak another language, or a marketing language often, when there are just general business buyers that want to know what's the point, what's the value, what's the unique selling proposition. So she and I see eye to eye on a lot of things, so I'm going to give her presentation, but you're free to ask me anything you want. So I've handled the where is Carol Godfrey and who are you? So who am I? I've talked about that. I did write a book last year on entrepreneurship. I'm very involved in the Founders Institute, which is a group that focuses on budding entrepreneurs and people that are incubating their businesses. I gave a talk last night with the Founders Institute over at ATDC. I'm involved with the Georgia Department of Education with their enterprise curriculum, which is not only at the high school level, but now has moved down into the middle schools and the elementary school, which is both STEM focused, but also just general business. So trying to introduce to younger and younger people the concepts of business, and not just the idea, but how you commercialize an idea, or how you get people passionate and bring them together around an idea. So in addition to the book that I wrote last year on entrepreneurship, I'm working on a children's book related to entrepreneurship because of all the young children now that are really showing aptitude for that. Okay, so I'm going to go right into Carol's presentation. Can you help with circumference and diameter? So, a lot of Carol's point of view, and a lot of the time that I've spent with her and with the various engineers at Southwire Company, first of all, show of hands, how many of you in here are engineering or highly technical students? Okay, good. Okay. And if you'd say general business, other, arms for that? Okay, it's good. Okay, so we will talk about how technology people learn to talk the other language. Yeah, exactly. They're all down at another school. Carol kind of told me what she had in mind, and I've taken some liberties with it, and so she can be blamed for the aesthetics of the presentation, but we see eye to eye on the content. So, when people come to you for your expertise, for your technical knowledge, and they really want to drill down into, help me with this problem, and I know this is your skill set, now how can you help me? I think, it's very important that you understand the benefits of being a technical subject matter expert, but then there are also limits on that. So In my experience, when people have come to technologists or engineers to solve a problem, very frequently you may just pick up the ball and say, okay, we're solving for this, let me show you how you solve it. And you're proving how smart you are, and you're proving how you earned your degree, but you haven't stopped and backed up for a second and asked, really important questions about what they want you to really accomplish, or what problem you're helping them solve by providing this subject matter expertise. And I think it's really important when you do develop a particular technical expertise that you understand what the people around you are doing with that expertise and what they need from you. And so to that end, rounding out your areas of expertise is really important. And so I facilitated a session for the American Marketing Association recently, and they had people that were marketing people at quick serve restaurants. And so, when and you think marketing people are on the panel, they're all going to talk about what campaigns they're doing. Well, the whole conversation was about metrics and analytics and how finance data drives decisions in quick serve restaurants. And there was no discussion had about, ad campaigns or billboards or anything, even though this was a marketing group. Everybody was talking about how, as marketing people, you're challenged to work cross-function with all the other people around you. And, in doing that, you really need to understand how your position in the firm impacts all the other line functions. So if you're a technology person, how do your decisions impact product development? How do they impact the supply chain? What do those inventions or innovations do to create a benefit to a sales force? How do marketing people talk about that to your public if you're buying public aren't technical people? And so it's very important to always be thinking about your expertise and to be proud of it, but to think of it in the context of how people around you are going to use that. I go back to think of the business impacts. If you take your expertise and you go get a job in an organization, don't just understand what your function in the company is. Really ask questions about the people that you're going to be working with on cross-functional teams, about how they are incentivized, how they use your information, how they're impacted by projections that you make, by products that you produce, etc. Okay, in keeping with Carol's slides, she put this lovely GIF in here. So this is this whole thing about what you're solving for and why. I have very frequently seen, again, I'll go back to the Southwire example, electrical engineers. The smartest people on earth. Some of the most amazing meetings that I've been in, where you'll have 5 electrical engineers talking about, the properties of a particular product, the jacketing compounds, the electrical capabilities of different products. And they talk shop for a long time, and you learn their acronyms, and you learn the jargon, and you understand it. But at the end of the day, you're left saying, what does that cable do for people, right? Who buys it? How does that help Georgia Power? What is the end benefit? And that's the thing I challenge all of you to be understanding if you are electrical engineers. How does electrical engineering impact humans, and impact the business I work for, impact their customers? Just really take your discipline further to the real world application of your experience and your expertise. And to me, in the years that I've seen people who began, let's say, came out of college, and Southwire is a great company, a wonderful company, and they're a great company for taking engineers very young into the boat. And it's very apparent in the first few years of working at the company which engineers are going to be in their little silo, working their diagrams, and which people are going to really look beyond and understand a broader impact of their expertise and scale into other positions and other ranks. Learn management skills, have soft skills, people skills, all the other skills. And so if you are an introvert and you really just like your discipline, that's great. There's a place for you. Know that about yourself. If you aspire to something higher, you really do need to kind of look outside yourself and get perspective from the people around you. And it's amazing how far you can take your expertise but leverage it to do many, many other things. Okay, so back to Carol and her animations. How pie is pie? So this is one that is really I think, very critical. And I'm going to blow through her presentation and we'll really do Q&A. But this is, that's the real pie equation. And there are times that it is critical in a business that you be that detail-oriented, right? That, you think about bringing new products to market, doing a proof of concept, certainly in electrical engineering. If you have a number wrong or a digit wrong, you can electrocute people, right? There's all these real-life implications of not having done your math or being diligent enough in that subject matter expertise. But the important part is really understanding at a particular point in time if you are supposed to be being really detailed in your subject matter or if you need to be thinking at a higher level. And that's where the pie equation, when Carol and I were talking about it, when is 3.1459 enough, right? So, I have been in environments with engineers who cannot get past that the calculation equals this, that's truth, we know it to be fact, and I'm not talking about it anymore. And the group needed to brainstorm. They needed to stretch the boundaries of what certain things were. Well, I know that's what the math says today, but what if we threw another compound in? Or what if we looked at another application of that? Is there another application? And so you really need to understand when you take your skills and your education into the workplace, what are you being asked to do? And really understand, am I being asked to be a complete, diligent technician, technologist, engineer in this environment? Are they asking me, generally speaking, to qualify that this is accurate? Because generally speaking, a lot of business people will make decisions on, I don't need to know all the math, I just need to know, generally speaking, in this environment, do we think this is viable? And particularly for me, in the marketing business, where there's a lot of loosey-goosey in marketing, when you market technical products, it's really critical to understand the truth, but not understand the truth with all the details. Because sometimes you can get so mired in all of those details that you lose sight of the bigger picture or the high points. And so, in my practice as a marketer over the many years, dealing with, software engineers, technology people, you kind of listen to all of it and then you say, am I to understand that this does X for someone? And then they say, yeah, but let me show you how it does it and why it does it and how long it, And so sometimes that's really useful to know all of it, and you have to have your math and your detail, and people need to know that you've done the work. But sometimes it's more important to give that sort of general picture of an application in your skill set. And sort of this last thing, and this really applies much more to management consultants than engineers, but the whole thing about they already know you're smart, that's why you're here and they're asking you questions. I work with a lot of management consultants. I work with private equity companies, and the consultants come in and, private equity companies want to buy businesses, and, they have engineers in the businesses that say the business is good, and then they have management consultants that say what's good and bad and whatever. And then ultimately we have to package it up and make it real and connect it to real customers. And with management consultants, you're always confronted with the smartest guy in the room, right? There's the one guy that I just want to be heard, and I have to make it absolutely known to everybody here that I'm the smartest person. It's not about the diploma behind them, but they are just going to talk you to death with the facts, right? And I just, and they're just not going to hear anything else. And it's really critical when you get into the workplace, and I think the initial instinct is to prove that you're smart and prove that you belong there, to not overspeak and overprove how smart you are. Just let your work speak for itself and spend more time understanding the dynamics going on around you and why people are asking you questions. I think if you put your energy there instead of proving yourself, you will prove your skills well beyond what your technical expertise is. Okay, so you're really, really good at it. All right, I didn't come up with this formula. Carol did. Great squared equals 1 divided by great. I really do. I understand what she's saying here, although I don't understand the formula. I'll tell you that. But the point being that let's say you really establish yourself as a person with a particular skill set, and everybody in the organization or everybody in your class knows that you're the person that really understands that. And so you're the go-to guy or gal for that content. That is wonderful when it starts to happen because it feeds your ego, it validates that you have expertise and you feel really great about it. But it can also be extremely limiting over time if you're the person with that knowledge. And here's where it's limiting. It's limiting if you become pigeonholed into, that's the guy that knows this stuff. And if you become so called on only to speak to this stuff, and this stuff could be something that's going to be obsolete in 5 years, or this stuff only has a limited application and there are other types of expertise that are much more in demand in your organization, then it can really be a detractor to you to be known as the expert in something. So that's something to be cautious of, is this notion of always evolving your expertise. This was one of the things that I talked about last night when I did the Founders Institute thing. There are companies coming out of the ATDC program, and they had 28 founders that came in. I think they're down to 15 founders now, and they're doing a proof of concept. And you know, they have a business model, they have a revenue model, they have a way they're going to commercialize and go to market. And all of them have a different subject matter expertise. You know, there are some people that are software, you know, techies. So you got tech guys that have applications. There are some people that have come out of banking and understand the dynamics of commercial banking and the data sets. And so they're data guys, and you know, they have businesses that they've seen out of that. And just other people that have different expertise and they want to leverage technology to bring it to market. And one of the things we talked about was they're all focused on the fact that next week when they graduate, they're done. And you know, we talked about this notion that you know, you're actually next week when you graduate is the first day, and every day you're in business is the first day, because every day is an opportunity to become obsolete because somebody else is spending the day that you're glad you arrived figuring out what's next. And this whole notion of planned obsolescence and evolving your expertise is really critical, because just because you came out of the school now with this expertise, you have to be conscious of where the discipline you're in is moving, right? So, and some disciplines move a lot quicker than others. So for instance, electrical engineering. Electrical engineering is pretty fundamental. There's a lot of fundamentals of it. But the boundaries of where you can push it are very interesting, right? When you turn it upside down and you look at it differently, there's a lot you can do. You can accelerate products to market, whatever. But what you've learned may not become outmoded, but what you do with it may really move along very rapidly in the marketplace. Of course, in the technology space, if you're software engineers, you know, that stuff, you know, people are going out of business before they even come up with their idea. You know, it's such a speed. So you have to constantly be thinking about how you're evolving your expertise, not just through your school, but through the industry that is around you, the competitors. You know, if you come out of here and you go into a business, learn about the business competitors. You know, don't just stay focused in your discipline, but understand what the dynamics around the business are, and understand then where the discipline may be going, and work to evolve yourself on that path. So then you're seen not just as an expert in this thing or this narrow area, but an expert in the moving discipline of whatever it is. So kind of maybe plant this idea of a moving discipline. I think that's critical. You know, I'm a big believer in lifelong learning. Of course, she talked about my degree when she introduced me. It took me 21 years to get a bachelor's because I was too busy working. And you know, the great thing about that is that the world kept evolving as I kept getting that education, and I never thought I was done. And so, you know, and I'm not done. And so I keep learning, and I keep learning, looking for areas to make myself more wise on my discipline, my industry, and you know, the ways that that is meaningful in the business and the world. And when things go wrong, and they do, again, this is all Carol. Magnifying glass doesn't have to burn you if you move your hand. This is really critical. I talked about the smartest guy in the room thing. There is something about technology people when you are mired in absolutes and you learn absolutes that sometimes you don't learn the flexibility thing. Maybe you don't have the gene naturally, or maybe you were taught that you need to protect your discipline. But to the extent that you can learn to be flexible and be creative with what you know, you will just excel through the rafters in any profession that you're in. And challenging perspective is important. I years ago heard the story of, Steve Jobs when he was trying to do the iMac, and his, software engineers were in the lab for 2 years working on prototypes, and they couldn't get it the way he wanted it. And he went out in his garden and he found a sunflower, and he's like, "That's what I've been looking for." He brought the engineers out to the sunflower, and he shows them the sun. "That's what I want. Can you make me that?" And there's a lot of talk about that, and it's kind of laughable that, "Look at the flower, make me the computer." But looking outside your discipline, looking at other industries, looking to nature, looking at music, looking at anything around you for a different perspective, fuels that creativity and allows you to leverage the expertise that you've gained and the technology that anchors you. And then this is really the last thing. I think I've kind of been speaking to this as we go. And again, I really welcome open season at Q&A. We can talk about technical communications. We can talk about technologists in the workplace. We can talk about marketing and advertising of them. We can talk about starting your business, anything you want to. But the main thing about being true to yourself and really knowing your place and knowing your value is developing some checks and balances. And I have a lot of young people that work in my company. There's about 15 of us. And I would say, 10 of the 15 are 27 or under. And a lot of the things that they do initially when they come into the workplace is, prove themselves, want to prove themselves, and they just get really focused on the job that they're doing, and they don't look out beyond that. And I think it's really important to understand the full context of you, right? So you are going to be graduates of this university. So that's one context of you, right? You will always represent this university. When you go out and you represent your technical expertise, if you get your numbers wrong, it's a ding on Georgia Tech, right? If you're phenomenal and you demonstrate that you are far more than an engineer or a software engineer, that you're a very creative thinker and you have business acumen, again, you will bring pride back on this institution. And so, there is always a broader context than the you that is you today in my car with my food, whatever. And you really need to think about that now as you go out into the world and think about yourself in a broader context. And so specifically, there's you in relation to your job or your business. And so that has a lot to do with your function, right? So let's say you get hired at whatever, Georgia Power, and they bring you in and you're doing line design. And you need to understand, as a line designer at Georgia Power, what are the things that are of value to Georgia Power? Where are the risks to Georgia Power in terms of places that line designers have failed them in the past? What are areas that Georgia Power could excel in their market against their competitors if line design were elevated to this area? So you're looking at yourself in the context of your job, and I always encourage everybody to blow that up, right? So if this is what I came in as, and this is what the job was defined as, how can I expand the value or the edges of that job? Then, so that's your job, right? That's what they pay you to do, and this is what you show up to do. And then there's your discipline. So you come out of this, whatever, I'm an electrical engineer, I'm a software engineer, I'm a whatever I am. That's your discipline. And so as a representative of that, again, you don't just want to be somebody that got taught what everybody's known for the last 10 years. You want to be somebody who learned the best of the best with the best and continue to move that along. So you kind of have a responsibility to your discipline or your technical skill set to be defining yourself and expanding what that discipline can be or how it can impact people around you. And then in relation to your place in the industry. So, again, people don't think a lot about that when they start out in the first few years about where do I fit in the industry. But over time, particularly with technology people or specialists, technical specialists, any kind of specialist really, if you determine I am an expert at this, there is what you do in your job, there's how you represent your discipline, but then there's where that fits in the broader industry and how you can impact or participate at an industry level. And so that could be things like, participating with IEEE in some of their case studies, in developing new products, or working with NETRAC on, different things. And so there's always a broader context out beyond your job, beyond what you already learned and what that discipline is, to connect with the larger world and kind of elevate yourself. And so, that's the thing that I think, when I think of the people, again, that have ascended to, all kinds of success in business, and they can still be technology people, and they may still be very focused on their expertise, but they never stopped learning, and they never stopped pushing the boundaries of how far they could push the discipline, and then through that, how they could push their company, and then through that, how they could push either the company or their own profile within a broader context of the industry. And then you have unlimited employment possibilities, right? Then that's when the world of management consulting opens up to you, which I know all of you are just dying to do. But being an analyst, I mean, that's a very real possibility. If you develop expertise, and the analyst community needs people that really have a certain skill set, that's a place that you can become the smartest person and have a broader impact on a larger group of people. So again, I encourage you to think about all that broader context. You've been very inward focused and doing your things, but the real opportunity is for you to not only come out and prove that you earned this degree and that you're worth the paycheck, but that you are a broader thinker, and that you can elevate that organization, you can elevate your position, and elevate yourself far beyond that. So that's what I have to say. Any questions?
Yeah, Moira, just a question here.
Hello, I'm Siddharth. My question to you is, how do you think technology and technologists are redefining the marketing business in the 21st century?
Okay. They're doing all of it because all the marketers are out of business. I think it's critical given where technology's been, and I have to say, I moved to Atlanta in 1988 on a Greyhound bus, and I got my first job in a technology company that was helping preserve legacy Wang systems. If anybody knows what a Wang computer is, you may not. But it was old, dead technology. And in those days, technology was very much in a box. Pre-internet, there was no internet then. When you look at where technology is now and the fact that it is leveraged for everything, technology is really the differentiator in almost any business. So whether it is, and I don't give a lot of credence to, social, right? I mean, it is what it is, and we all enjoy it, and that's fun. But I'm talking about like mobility, providing people with real-time applications to the data that they need. You think of machine to machine and what it's doing to elevate manufacturing. It really, technology is critical to all of it, which is all the more reason that anybody that's in it needs to be able to speak the language of all the other people around them, because technology isn't itself just a product anymore. It is the differentiating point that is used in every industry almost. And that's, there are some industries where people are what differentiate them, but those are people using technologies to be better and smarter, more accessible in most cases. So I think that any business that's succeeding now is looking for better and smarter ways to use technology, but they need technology people that are going to speak English and look for the business application and the practical application of that technology.
Hi. I had a question. A lot of us students from Georgia Tech go into technical roles or technology companies, and I personally find myself to be a creative person, but sometimes that gets stifled going into these entry-level jobs where you don't have a lot of autonomy. What tips do you have to incorporate creativity into your role if you don't have a lot of independence?
So I have a couple thoughts on that. The first thing is, I think what you're talking about is kind of the fallback, right? Okay, I have to do this job and I'd like to be a little creative, so how can I build some in? But what would be even better is if you could insert yourself as an engineer into the creative process of the business. So what I would first recommend, and I just think back to again, I mentioned Southwire and all the sessions we had. We used to have all these marketing planning sessions about how they would go to market, you know, what the products would do for Georgia Power and Duke Power and everybody else. And the most meaningful sessions we ever had included the engineers, because they had to talk about what the benefits were, and watching them brainstorm what the products can do. And not just that, but how you demonstrate mechanical properties or physical, you know, I mean, they come up with many more creative, interesting, stunning ways that you can display what something does than regular people around them do. And so I think that if you can find a way to connect yourself to a marketing person, an operations or a commercial, I mean, again, every org chart in every company is different, but to the extent that you can say, I have technical expertise, I also think outside the box, and I like to look at what the application of this, you know, expertise is. If you can talk about that and kind of get yourself inserted in with the people that want those hybrid, she's a technologist and she's got that degree, but she can speak English. I mean, that's really how they will talk about you, you know. And I know a whole bunch of people that don't speak English at Southwire, and I will go to them when I need, you know, the 17th and 18th slide on a deck, and I need to know it's accurate. But for the first, you know, 16 slides, I'm going to go to you and say, okay, I need context for people. I don't want to, you know, I don't need the whole pie equation. What does this mean, and how does it help people? And so I think if you can position yourself that way in the organization and find your way to the people that place a premium on technology people that can think like humans, then that's how I think that's the best way to get your creativity out, because you're not just consoling yourself in your own little silo. You're bringing your value out and opening up a broader, you know, creative outlet for yourself and the organization.
Hi. As a business student who is going to work in a very technical environment when I graduate, what are some of your tips as a marketing person, kind of reducing those barriers of communication between very technically minded people and not so technically minded people?
Yep. The very first thing is to find out if the very technology-minded people have any biases about non-technology people. So I have been in, you know, organizations where there are 2 non-technology people, and everyone in there is a PhD, and they're all smart. And so the first thing to do is really find out where the biases are, because you don't want to, again, you don't want to solve for something that's not there. If they have been dying to get a non-technologist in there, they will love you anyway. So don't, you know, worry about trying to, you know, prove why you're going to be of value. I think the reverse is true. I think that most technology-laden organizations that are just full up to here with technologists, they have several challenges that a business student can help with. Often they are so mired in their detail that they have a problem stepping back a little bit and looking at it, or putting it into buckets, you know, like, because they're all in the weeds of the detail. And so sometimes the perspective that you can offer as a general business person is some of that arm's length perspective. Another thing that you can do is represent customer point of view. You know, all through the .com, before the .com era, I worked with all these technology companies, and, you know, the list is infinite of people who built things, and they will come, right? And so a lot of companies, you know, they get somebody to write them a check, they get hooked up to an incubator program, and we'll just build stuff forever, right? But then you have to commercialize it. In order to commercialize it, you have to figure out, is anybody going to pay for it? Is anybody going to use it? Is anybody going to care and tell their friends? And that's the perspective that all those people who've built this perfect thing, that they get how it functions, have a challenge talking about how it is usable, why it is valuable to a non-technical person. And that's a different skill set, and particularly in my space, because I've always done, you know, the first 8 years of my advertising career was technology-only advertising. And so I would always interact with those people, and then it's a translation exercise. You know, it's very much, okay, I get all these data points. Am I right in understanding that that then makes it 3 times faster? You know, or am I right in understanding that this and this and this mean it's 2 times safer? Or, you know, while you've been in your little isolated box, building, 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 I happened to notice that these 10 competitors emerged. I mean, that's another thing that business people can look at the dynamic going on around somebody who thinks, man, I created the most wonderful thing and it's the only one there is, except for the 8 people that just launched one, that you've been so focused on it you weren't looking around you. So I think that outside perspective, the customer point of view, is something that you provide. And one of the most important things I go back to, again, I'm a marketing person, is how it makes money. You know, the days are gone where people will just fund something forever because it looks useful and everybody needs it and it ought to be a right, or you know, whatever it is. You know, even in the social media space, I did a workshop the other morning with CMO for Coke, CMO for Google was there, CMO for Georgia Pacific, and CMO for IBM. All 4 of them were in there. And they all said, we don't know what social media does for us. You know, the CEO is tired of us paying for it, and we can't tell them how it makes money for anybody. But I'm going to crack this. I'm going to figure out a way that some of this engagement and activity can be qualified in terms of money. And again, a lot of what I do is I work with private equity community, investors, and those are the people that technology people are going to have to go to fund their next round, to grow and to scale. And all those people want to know, how does this make money? So if you can focus on why this is valuable to a customer, what has been going on around you in a competitive space that you may have missed while you were building the perfect beast, and then how it will make money over time, then you're golden.
My name is Joseph. I'm a business student. I was just wondering, you talked a lot about speaking the language, and I was wondering what strategies that you use in order to communicate effectively with some of the coworkers that are more engineering focused.
Yeah, you need to, well, okay, in my business, I feel it is our responsibility to know the language of our customers and their jargon, but for them to not know ours. And I think it's useful for everybody to actually take that position. So every business and every industry is just rife with acronyms and jargon and stuff. And the first thing you can do is find out what it means, create a glossary of terms for yourself, whatever. But the most dangerous thing you can do is to learn those things and then use your own jargon that the technology people around you don't know. So you can start talking about ROI, and you can talk about, you know, whatever impressions per dollar, and you know. So the goal is not to have a jargon contest, right? The goal is to really know what terms they use constantly and what the meaning of those terms are. And then also what terms you use that they may not understand and they don't want to tell you they don't understand. Because again, technical people are not going to say, what are you talking about? I don't know what that is. They're just going to sit there. You know, because you're, you know, by nature, a technical person usually, genetically, is very well informed, you know, and so they're not going to say, could you run that by me? You know, I haven't heard that acronym before. And really, most people aren't going to do that. And so, you know, you need to debunk any jargon you use and clarify it for everybody like you're telling your mother. And then, you know, the same in understanding theirs. And I think what's really critical in understanding theirs, if you are in, like you talked about being in a technology setting, and again, for me, I'm a marketing and advertising person, I go into a technology business, they immediately presume I don't know anything, I'm a fluffy person, right, because I do marketing. So if you know what their language means and why it's significant, and you can demonstrate that to them, then you immediately have credibility. So that's the benefit of learning their terminology and using it with them, because then the trust is gained very quickly. If there is terminology you don't understand, immediately identify it as something you haven't heard before so that you can quickly get it. But don't get all, you know, I think that especially younger people get very guarded about not wanting to admit they don't know what something is, or that they want to prove that they do know what something is. If you can just get rid of all of that and say, okay, I know what all those mean, but I don't get that one, and I'd like to learn it as quickly as possible so that, one, I can be credible, but I can also speak your language, then that's the best thing. And the thing that you're going to find is there's a whole common language that goes across a discipline. You will have whole sets of language that go across line functions in a business. If you're in finance, you have your own set of jargon that's finance related. And if you're in the supply chain, you're going to have your set of acronyms. But also then you got vertical markets, right? So okay, now I'm doing technology in the healthcare space and I'm working with finance people. Now you got 3 layers of jargon in there. So you got all your technology language, you got your medical and healthcare and HIPAA stuff going on, and then on top of it you've got finance things, right? What's our EBITDA on the ACA launched mobile PDA thing, right? And so it really does get kind of insane, and you really need to know where's the space you're playing, who are the people you're going to be interacting with, and as quickly as possible develop that language, because that's what says you're credible when you get it.
Hi, I'm Claudia, and you mentioned the challenge to challenge everyone, and like how does the cable help people? And I mean, if I think about it, if I start working like my first job, how do you approach that? How do you challenge people that have been there 20 years, 30 years? Like, how do you come about doing that?
Okay, so you do and you don't. So I'll start with that. So first of all, you don't start out trying to prove yourself. First, you find out who's closed to new ideas, which there will be a set of people. The good news is, particularly if you're in the electrical engineering space, that there's a whole bunch of people retiring right now. So, when I think about 21 years ago when I started working with Southwire, there absolutely were the wise old owls, and Ridley Thrash. Love Ridley. Nobody would ever question Ridley on anything, And, there are people that are in their discipline that are creative and do encourage young people to bring ideas and to challenge and push the envelope. You want to find out who those people are and get nearer to those people so that you can bring the ideas up. Some of it is just systemic, and if you happen to get into an organization that has a whole bunch of senior people that have been there forever, you got to wait for them to go. Or you have to wait a certain amount of time to prove that you have additional information and insight that you can prove to them. But I don't want to, pretend that you can just go in there and blow them all out. But I do see a lot of change, and even in some of the more traditional engineering environments and clients that we've worked on, there is so much more time being spent in public-private partnerships, bringing in interns, doing school programs where they're bringing in younger engineers. And when you have a company that is engaged in those kind of exercises, it says something about their position about new ideas. And so that can tell you something about it. So let's say you had 3 companies you wanted to interview with. You could find out about them by asking about their engineering practice, find out how many years their people had been there, how many young people have they brought on, and where did they bring them in? Did they do internships with those people? And it will tell you a little bit about how open they are to new ideas. Hi.
I'm from electrical engineering. It's glad to hear that lots of our ancestors are retiring.
Yes.
But I'm curious about how the marketing strategy in a big corporation are made. You have worked with many big companies, but they also have their own marketing departments.
Yep.
So what's your company do that they don't, and vice versa?
Okay. Okay. So I'll tell you what we tell them when we want them to hire us. One, I don't compete against internal marketing people. If you have internal marketing people and you've decided you want to build your own, fantastic. And often internal marketing people are fantastic. They're well trained, they're very close to the organization, they hear all the internal discussion. Sometimes internal marketing people don't quite have the cutting edge talent that agency people have, because agency people are on a revolving door, they're job jumping and they're gaining new skills. But by nature of getting into a corporation, you might get a little more stale. So not that I told anybody that, but that's what I will say about internal marketing departments. Sometimes they are the pigeonholed people, and they aren't the most leading edge people, which is often just fine for technology companies. They don't always have to have the most far out crazy things. They just need things that make sense and make sense to buyers. But in terms of what an agency can bring to a technology business, often it is a fresh perspective. It is not being mired. So for instance, if I were working with marketing people within a company, they would already know that this senior engineer is never going to approve that. And they will already know that the supply chain has said that that product is a bad idea. And so they come with all of these preconceived, we tried that, it didn't work, shot down things. And so as an outside agency coming into a technology organization, you have more, you have just more outside third-party arm's length ability to say, have we tried this? Also, you can often represent the customer. So this, one of the things that we always do is we want to talk to the customer, because the customer isn't always the same technology person that built what the solution is. In my business, the clients that we serve have very long sales cycle, very high ticket item things, and they're usually bought by committee. And the committee is usually a finance person, a technical person, and an operations person. And so in that world, the technology alone people or the internal marketing people often can't pull together the whole perspective that the whole buying committee needs. And they also sometimes do not have, as marketing people within a company, they may not be salespeople, whereas outside marketing people are very trained in sales and marketing as a discipline. And so one of the things we always talk about, if this is the buying cycle of your customer, this is the sales cycle that you map to. And a company will often just focus all on the sales cycle. Here's how we built it and why it's great, and this is what you tell them. Instead of, this is what it does for somebody, and these are the 78 steps that they have to go through to make this consideration and buy it. And by the way, these are the 10 people that have to be on board when they make the buying decision. And so that's perspective that's sometimes lost inside because you're so inwardly focused that you don't see the outward dynamic going on with the customer. And so that's something that often an agency, again, you need to find the right kind of agency, because there are a lot of agencies that are wasteful, high creative, no business strategy, not what we focus on. But you do have to make sure that the outside agencies are anchored in what the business strategy is, and if they can bring to you all the other perspectives on why people buy, not just why you should sell it and what you want to push out, that's the real value that an agency will bring. Okay.
My name's Meredith. My question is more towards your background than the presentation, but considering all your experience with entrepreneurs, what's one piece of advice you would give to future entrepreneurs?
Gosh, that's tough. The first, the thing I will say is just never give up. It's the never give up thing. I have had 5 businesses, 2 of them marginally successful, the first dreadful. We're really successful now. I've also helped other people grow their businesses. And so it was through the insights of their failures and my own failures that I've now arrived at success. And often, when you're an entrepreneur, particularly if you're a subject matter expert and it's your baby and you built it, if you're the inventor entrepreneur, it is very hard to separate yourself from your invention, and it is very hard to give yourself space to fail and then try again. So to me, it's that resilience gene is the most critical thing, because you're going to have a lot of people tell you no, and you aren't going to succeed probably the first time. And most serial entrepreneurs that, if you really talk to people that make it in forming businesses, they're on their 4th or 5th business. They don't figure it all out in their first business. So did I answer your question? Okay.
I was just wondering, you've talked a lot about the context mindset, and I was wondering if there's any thoughts that you had on how, for someone who may be more of a not so contextually mindset, that you could just attack that and kind of develop that mindset, or experiences that or people that you could seek out. What kind of people should I look to be around, or what kind of experiences should I seek?
Got it. I always start again with what you're trying to do in your current job. And, the presentation that I gave last night to the Founders Institute, it was about influence. A lot of it was about influence and establishing yourself. And one part of the discussion was about the same places you're going to get the best information. If you affiliate with them, they actually will also provide you with a platform and a place to share your own ideas. And one of the things that I always focus on, because again, our clients are B2B and very technical. We're not talking about consumer businesses. I'm not talking about Coke reaching 1 billion people with something. Sometimes our clients need to get 30 customers, you know. And so when you have a defined market, you need to understand what the 1 or 2 top associations that focus on that, and so sometimes it's an association, sometimes it's a lobbying group. So, you know, I work with Southwire on this theft prevention product that they have, and the scrap recyclers are a key part of the value proposition of that. So they got involved with ISRI, which is International Society of Recycling something something, and so that's not an you know, the recycling community wouldn't necessarily be where Southwire engineers would go to get information and to establish themselves, but it was critical for this particular product. And so I figure out the association that either covers your industry or is tied in. Then the analyst, I mentioned earlier, analysts, you know, they put out they're the smartest guy in the room, and they're publishing constantly, and they have to do research. I mean, it's not just a blog post and 3 paragraphs and yay. You know, it's detailed stuff. And so analysts are wonderful because they often have, you know, they cite resources and references and all kinds of things, so you can expand your mind that way. I also think, again, finding the most wise people in your organizations. I know Carol wasn't here today, but Carol is one of the wisest people that I've known because she does think cross-function. So she doesn't just think, what is the marketing or sales point of view on this? She says, what is the engineer's point of view? What's the operator's point of view? What's the guy in the plant floor manufacturing it point of view? How does the customer's finance guy view? You know, so if you find out who the real players are in those different line functions to get perspective, that's important. You know, I mean, here's the thing: I don't have time to read, so I'm not a big professor of, you can sit with your Twitter feed for 3 hours or whatever, but usually it's just find the few wise people and then just keep going back to the few wise people or the few wise sources. But you should have them in the organization and outside the organization, because again, if you only focus in the organization, you're going to get that point of view that is here's the view of the world, and you need to constantly be adding to it the outside perspective. Another thing that you can do, if you can get a board position or be on a committee where competitors in your space also are, it can be very helpful, because you're not really, you're not trying to learn what they're doing, but you're in the environment where they are, and you can find out what competitors are doing. And that's a huge value to your company if you know what competitive people around you are doing. So to me, it's the wisest people in the organization, broad cross-functional, the few lobbying analyst associations that are deemed the smartest guys in your industry, and then what are the key competitors. And not every competitor, not even what the head of sales says your competitor is, but find out for 3 years from now, who do we want our competitor to be.